Greetings. The episode of 33 North, 96 West that you are about to see or hear is actually the third and final episode of a three-part installment where Terry and I discuss the universal laws or principles and relate them to the physical body and our energy centers in the physical body. So, of course, you are welcome to just appreciate this one episode as a standalone, or if you haven't yet listened to part 1 and part 2, we recommend that you consider clicking back so that you receive the benefit of the full series in sequence. Okay, thanks very much for joining us. Here we go. If a bunch of us are vibrating in fear, we are progressing the energy of fear as a force. Mm-hmm. If a lot of us are in the frequency of love, that is the force that we progress.
You mentioned we would come to time and rhythm. So everything has a time according to these teachings. And I would like to add in a couple of different words. And that time is connected to speed. Which so it's connected to speed, which I'm also going to call frequency. Mm-hmm. So the rhythms are connected to time or this speed or frequency because how many times you vibrate is the rhythm. So when Jared's talking about the lower wave, the more dense wave, that's connected to much more time. It's a slower speed. You even said, I'm not sure the exact word you said, but the energy it's sluggish.
Yeah.
It's sluggish. That's the best words coming to me. And so if that's the rhythm, what it is that you are manifesting is going to take, if we're bringing it back into just a 3D timeline, it's going to 3D or 4D timeline, that linear is what I'm trying to say. It's going to take much longer for that manifestation and creation to happen. Whereas if we're at a much higher vibration, a much higher frequency, let's just use that word, that's also a faster speed, which I also feel connects to Jared's discussion on amplitude. As we amplify it, it's going to speed up. And so it can happen a lot faster. Yeah.
So let's put this into the context of collective manifestation too.
Okay.
I guess what I'm wanting to get at is if 6 billion people are vibrating in despair and 1 billion people are vibrating in ecstasy, first of all, what is the effect? You see there's like this push and pull between these forces. There's like, there's a relationship, a correspondence. So can one person, let's put this in a context of like an organization, like we're in a business, and one person is vibrating really high, and the rest of the people are come into that environment vibrating low. What happens in that environment when they come together? Does the high vibrating person potentially have an influence to bring the others into resonance or coherence? What does that look like? What's your intuition telling you?
It's law of entrainment. And it ties to what I've been, and that is not one of these 7, by the way, but it is a universal principle. Law of entrainment, just to put it in some 3D tangible words here. And what I was thinking as you were beginning the conversation about this question for the collective is that the work, if you will, and I don't say that from a place of making it arduous, But the spiritual journey, let's change it to that. The spiritual journey, which I often call the work. So people will want to bypass a lot of it. The work, the inner work. The inner work is absolutely necessary. So it comes back to the individual. If the individual is doing that inner work, if the individual is evolving and on this spiritual journey of witnessing and understanding more of itself, we have, to break it down to very simple terms, we have two choices. We can choose to vibrate in the absolute truth and resonance that we are. And if we do choose to stay in that place, and I don't mean that we're stagnant because it's energy, but if we know and understand, and I'm constantly on the wave and are making the conscious choices of what wave to be on, the speed of the wave, the frequency of the wave, we can move very quickly. Even if we come out of that resonance, we can resonance with self, all of who and what we are. We can come very quickly back to that when we have this understanding and this experience of it. And so law of entrainment says that the energy in the room automatically, I'm just going to use a room, for example, or the business that you were saying, the energy in the space automatically will come to the highest vibration within that space. Now, if you make conscious choices, unconscious, even completely unconscious choices, but if you make the choice to oppress yourself, to hide aspects of yourself, when I am, and I can use a personal example of this very strongly, but when I am in work mode, I am a different person. I have a different hat. And I've got my work hat on, not my personal hat. Prior to me being in self-development and holistic healing, that was not only my belief, but my very strong stance of they don't get to see who I am personally. I have a different persona. So was I raising the vibration of that space? Minimally, but not as effectively as I could have, because I wasn't making a choice to honor myself and totally be myself and who I knew I was in that moment. So I was choosing a lower vibration wave when in the presence of these people. So I say all that to say, sometimes I'll talk about law of entrainment and people will say, oh, well, it's automatically going to drop down to the more predominant frequency of which is usually, as you gave the numbers of, say, for example, 6 billion and 1 billion, it's going to automatically come down to that frequency. That's going to depend on the choices the individuals are making that come into that space. And I have experienced this real time strongly over and over and over until I realized I really do have the energy, the privilege of creating the energy before I go into the space. And so had I not had the contrasting experiences of that, I would not have been able to see through the law of correspondence what I was doing and how I was vibrating.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a long answer, but it felt really important because, and then one other thing I would like to tie to that is when you're talking business, there's a lot of teachings out there, theories that the 80-20 rule. So let's just say 80% of your business comes from 20% of your customers. That's just a very general, basic teaching in the teachings of business. It's kind of the same concept. The smaller percentage can actually affect a larger percentage if being mindful and consciously aware of that and having that intention.
I've reminded myself, or we've reminded me of something that Abraham expresses often through Esther. One who's in alignment is more powerful than millions who aren't.
Yes.
That was a bit of a departure from rhythm, but I think it relates because it speaks to, I'm just going to go ahead and be confessional for a moment and say timing is among my greatest challenges because I so clearly understand both personally and collectively what's coming and where we're headed. And I kind of live in that space. And then I moved through a life where it would be easy for me to give attention to things around me that would distract me from what I know is coming. So I have benefited greatly from reminding myself about rhythm and being patient and gentle and allowing natural rhythm and things to happen, and reminding myself that I'm not solely responsible for everything, and that you all have to take some responsibility for this too. We're in this together. So
because of this law of rhythm, it is very necessary to be in harmony. And I think that connects to what Jared just said. So remembering and reminding ourselves that our own personal experience may not always be what the majority experience is. That's one scenario, and it can go the other way too. In other words, we do have choice in the rhythm, which we will be in, the vibration, the frequencies, the speed, all of that. But it's kind of a reminder that because this is physics, we want to be in harmony. So if we vibrate, if we vibrate at a lower frequency the majority of the time, we're obviously not going to be in harmony. If we vibrate at a higher frequency the majority of the time, we can also get out of harmony and cause what we call or interpret as a crisis. Because what's happening in that case, and people talk, I literally get messages every day about this. Everything's happening so fast. Everything's so fast. Energy is so fast. What is happening? What's going on in the cosmos? And, and I'm speaking fast because that's their energy is so fast.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, okay, this is when we're at a precipice of a crisis. Let's take a few deep breaths. Let's slow down, because you're vibrating at a frequency that's not even allowing you to pause, reflect.
Yeah.
You're not even bringing in the law of correspondence and witnessing it, because you're just going so fast. So other principles might be not coming into the experience of that. And that is when when we're not in harmony with that, we can create a crisis. And it was quite an epiphany for me to really say, wow, I can understand being in as we call it, a slower speed, a slower, lower frequency. I can understand being out of alignment and having a crisis. It was a whole different experience to be in a very high vibration to the point and to have a crisis. And we talked about that in a previous episode. That was quite a different experience. But still, law of correspondence worked on me. And I said, wait a minute.
Yes.
What might this experience have been?
Yes. Beautiful.
Still disharmony, in other words.
Well, because by virtue of your awareness, you found the harmony. You found the frequency of harmony in the situation that could be described as crisis. And that's really, as we said, that's really what we're talking about with this breaking apart of this principle into these 7 different laws or principles through the energy centers, is to cultivate and deepen our awareness so that we can do that. Like ultimately, if you are in a regular practice of checking in with each of these, you start with your crown and you go to your third eye, and then you go to your throat and you go to your heart, like on a daily basis, or in the course of an experience or an environment, like checking in with all of these and making coming to an awareness of where they are, where you are in relationship to things. Like, that's what the goal is. So you say, wait a minute, all this stuff is happening. I was vibrating too high. This crisis happened. I'm going to bring myself back into harmony. I'm going to do my work. I'm going to take responsibility. I'm not going to assign blame outside of me. I'm going to say, I'm the co-creator of my experience with my source. This is where I'm headed next.
And it's what we call grounding. In other words, in that experience, I needed to be more embodied. more in the body.
Ah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Whereas often our experiences are, I need to be less in the body, so it's finding that balance and that harmony. And because if we are trying to accelerate the process, I heard this phrase from somebody, those 3 words, accelerate the process. Well, that's the energy behind the messages and the memes of just vibrate high. Just vibrate high. Just think positive all the time.
There's subtle resistance in that, isn't there?
Yes.
Resistance to what is.
Right. And that's something that can be a little challenging to deliver to people because they're thinking, wait a minute. Okay, you were vibrating at this really high, fast place and manifesting like crazy and then had a crisis. And so people are shocked by that and don't understand. It's still an imbalance. Yeah. It's a disharmony. It's not negative. It's not bad. It's not wrong. It's just it's a disharmony. So it's that reminder that the idea, which became our creation in form, was just that, to be in form and to have these experiences and to create in form and formlessness. And so if our goal is to just be in formlessness, we're not going to be integrated and embodied in the experience we're having. And vice versa, if we are in resistance to looking at the etheric and spiritual aspects of it, which we have said before, is not just esoteric. There's a lot of science and physics behind all this. But if we're choosing the other and just to stay in this vibration, we're going to have the same type of experience. Not the same type. That's an incorrect statement. Let me just say it's still going to result in a potential crisis. How we view that is going to be based off, I think, where we were vibrating when the experience happened.
And what relationship you claim through correspondence.
Absolutely.
With the events that precipitated because of your...
Yes. So
this is fascinating.
It is fascinating. This. And so I want to tie it back to what you said in talking about rhythm is that, see if I can recall how I wanted to tie that. The collective. So if we are witnessing the disharmony within the collective, that ties back to, okay, then what can we do about it? And I think the answer always comes back to remembering through doing our own work of being self-responsible, having an understanding and a relationship to these universal principles, to energy, to physics, to form and formlessness. The more we can have that in our understanding, the more we can emanate that out. And we don't have to be the majority to affect change.
Yeah. And claiming the divinity of everyone. Because as we said in a previous episode, when you realize your own divinity, you realize everyone else's as well. Regardless of how things are outpictured or how we behave. That applies to yourself and to others. But the attitude, the vibrational countenance to claim that is the most productive and supportive of everyone's expansion is to claim their divinity, even when they don't.
Yes. Yeah. And that even ties to what was coming into my thoughts is, which I really would love us to have more discussion on in future episodes, but that, again, tying it back to kind of remembering that you do have not only the choice, but the privilege to show up as your true, authentic self with the energy of responsibility and so forth, rather than moving into the energies and frequencies of what is happening in the disharmony around you. And that alone in itself is a complex experience.
Yeah, simply because how ingrained we've become in observing what is and how we have been.
Yes, absolutely.
It's a paradigm shift that's totally available. Like to move through your whole life with this awareness, it's amazing. Like, I don't even know. I can't say more about it right now because I can't describe it. But if everybody was doing it, see, I'm getting myself in trouble. Okay, what's next?
Getting yourself in trouble.
Getting myself in trouble.
So our fifth universal principle is we move down to the solar plexus, the power center, power chakra, and that is cause and effect. So nothing can escape this principle or this law. So when you see an effect outpictured in your experience, the invitation, and this of course connects to all of these others, so there's not as much to say on it because it's pretty self-explanatory, but this is the one I was talking about that connects to it's also known as the law of responsibility.
Ah.
Okay, so you can, at this point, by looking at what's outpictured, which we have already alluded to this and discussed it quite a bit, is that whatever you're seeing outpictured, you have the opportunity to go within and see what is the cause of that. So without judgment of self and others and situations and circumstances and experiences, without judgment, just literally looking at what is the cause, what is the effect? Am I in alignment with the effect? Does it feel good within my field, my vibration? Am I, we can ask these questions of self, and if there's any aspect that does not feel within what we would desire or what we would feel serves a purpose that we feel we are, then we can look at what might be the causes.
I'd like to ask, do we always have to discern or understand the cause? And along with that, is it enough to simply observe an effect and realize you desire to make a shift? And part of why I want to ask that is because I've been contemplating lately the patterns of being at a soul level or an essence level, and maybe coming to the realization that if you have always been and you will always be there, it would be very overwhelming to come into full conscious awareness of all the causes of everything you have ever experienced, and then notice the effects right now. And so the question is, do you have to really dig deep always and find the cause?
Absolutely not. The purpose of that, and I probably would have been good to add that disclaimer before I discussed. I was basically talking about if you are looking to effect change through the cause and effect. That was a mouthful. If you continuously see a pattern, a cycle, a loop that is undesirable, then going in and exploring that can definitely give you some powerful insight. On the other side of that, if that is what you always do, like you said, do you have to go in and dissect everything? You will continuously create that energy of always needing to know. So I said to someone yesterday, we had pretty extensive conversations over time period. And they were doing, so another thing you could associate this with that's out there in the field is shadow work. So what you're doing is you're going in to identify what is unknown in your conscious awareness. What's in the unconscious or that's moving through the subconscious that's coming into your field for this shift, if you will, and this law of correspondence. I'm witnessing this within self, and I would like to vibrate higher and faster in this particular aspect. And I said to them, but do you really... The conversation kept coming back to, it was a loop. And it kept coming back to, but I need to know, but I need to know more, but I need to know more, but I need to know more. And I said, do you really need to know more? Or can you just, as Jared just said, or can you recognize that the effect is not what you're desiring and you can have the intention to change the effect? Or do you really have to go back through that law of correspondence of I need, I want, I need, I want. So you're going to create more of that. So it is a complex thing to comprehend at times until we actually recognize that we're experiencing it. So I'm going to also talk about, in the work I've done over the years, is I will say to clients something that really throws them off when they first come to me. We're not healing here. We're not working on healing. Your concept is we're here because there's always something that needs to be healed. Well, as long as you think there's always something that needs to be healed, we will always be in the energy of healing. So let's start shifting that. And how can we shift that? So I'm asking people, let's explore ways and ideas of maybe how we can shift these frequencies, these vibrations, these intentions around what would I desire to see outpictured rather than what is broken. And you already are healed. It's just you shifting your perspective to what that looks like.
It's realizing it.
It's realizing it.
Yeah. So brilliant.
Yeah.
So some of you may be tempted to say, to relate cause and effect with karma. And I think I understand why we would make that connection. So I want to dispel. Is this phenomenon intended to be something that you're punished by?
No. Yeah.
Is there any shadow that you may contemplate or realize about yourself that doesn't contain a gift?
No.
Is there any karmic pattern or predicament that you haven't agreed to at a soul level?
No.
To experience? So the empowering aspect of this is to say, I may be the cause. My consciousness may be the cause of all kinds of wonderful, beautiful, brilliant things. And take care of, don't feel like you have to justify and explain and get down to the bottom of every single thing. I mean, some of us like to figure things out. We're seekers and we want to learn, like, what's this about and why am I doing this? And what kind of childhood wounding or past life situation was I in that made me have to experience this, you know? So as long as it feels good to do that, I guess there's no harm in it. I mean, you are kind of reactivating things on a certain level, but it's empowering to know that you may be the cause of all kinds of beautiful, wonderful expansion and expression.
Yes. And again, it's a balance and a harmony to go back and look at our conditioning, our programming, our experiences, our childhood beliefs, our core beliefs, our core wounds, our core fears, our traumas, our triggers. It's not to say that that is wrong or a mistake, because that's bypassing if we don't look at that. But do we want to choose to stay there? That's sabotage. That's self-sabotage to say, okay, well, I got to this layer, I peeled this layer of the onion, and now there's so many more layers. I can't stop until I get to the core.
Yeah, I would say in my experience, there has been a certain amount of deliberate focus and shadow work that I've done, but there's also been a natural rhythm of having things presented to me for me to contemplate and discern. I'll give you an example. So through the gene key synthesis, I have the gene key 27 as my life's work. And this is the energy that moves from the shadow frequency of selfishness to the gift frequency of altruism to the Siddhic frequency, or the highest frequency of selflessness. And so I've contemplated like moments in my life where I've felt like I was behaving selfishly. Sometimes I feel that justified for me to have been selfish, for me to take care of my needs. Sometimes selfishness can be enlightened. And I've also contemplated, like, what are some altruistic things that I've done? At the highest level, selflessness, I mean, ultimately this speaks to the unity and of our shared collective awareness. I mean, that's the suggestion of where we're headed with this frequency of energy. But the other day, I just had this flash in my consciousness, like, oh, I think I've been selfish in past lives. And so I came here to learn the opposite of that, so my soul can integrate. So sometimes when I'm feeling a pull to do something selfish, and like I've thought about this at all kinds of levels, like my desire for personal artistic self-expression. I mean, there's a level of selfishness in that. Like, for instance, in an architectural situation, client, I need you to live in this house the way I design it because it's my artistic desire and it needs to be manifest this way. And I can even say, well, I'm tuned into the causal field and I'm realizing high-level architectural solutions, and you need to support me in bringing this into manifestation. And, but there's some selfishness in that. So I'm not really even criticizing it at this point. I'm just objectively observing. And so I didn't have to I guess it goes back to actually what relationship you're claiming with your shadow work. Mm-hmm. It's like, if you're doing it and it's just causing your frequency to go lower and lower and you're digging yourself into a hole, maybe give yourself a break. But if you can kind of experience shadows as sort of a creative muse, address them honestly when they're presented to you or when phenomenon arise, can be a little bit more playful. Realize, again, the intention of it is that we're in a learning hologram. We have to have contrast.
We're not in the wave. If we just keep going lower and lower and lower, we're not, which is going to tie into our next universal principle. But we're not going to, we're not going to be on that wave. We're not going to be in harmony. We're not going to be able to be in balance if we are choosing to just keep diving into one without coming back up. So we have these periods in life where, okay, well, we're going to go in. We're going to explore the subconscious, the unconscious. We're going to bring it to the surface, and then we're going to bring it, the enlightenment, the epiphanies, and when I say enlightenment, I'm not referring to a standard definition out there of there is a place to achieve and you are there. Coming in the light of the knowing of something, to me, is what these universal principles are all about. But the sixth one is polarity. And so it's understanding that you've got a couple of perspectives that you could approach with polarity. And ask yourself, before I even talk about what it is to the audience, just an invitation if you feel called. Are you Are you using polarity? Are you in polarity for creation or for separation?
Oh, I love that.
Me too. It gives me full body chills because that question ties to so much of what I have talked about in various conversations and platforms, is that we have talked so much about the separateness consciousness and then maybe the wholeness consciousness, divine consciousness. But point being is, if we are using polarity and we are approaching it from a perspective of separation, all of these others are going to have a different experience. We're going to have a slower experience on our timeline, lower frequency, lower vibration, that deeper, more dense, sluggish experience. If we are using it for creation, which is, I'm basically re-saying what Jared just said, is that, wow, the possibilities, all that I am and can be. And so it's a question to really ask yourself, because the norm, the social and cultural suggestions have been polarity is either good or bad.
Right, wrong.
Right, wrong.
Light, dark.
Exactly.
So let me ask you this. Does Terry prefer to engage and manifest and consciously create when she's on the negative end of her wave, or when she's on the positive end of her wave?
Positive for me.
Is that a silly question? Yeah. So, does she need to fix it when she's on the negative end of her wave?
No, I need to experience it and look at it.
Yeah. Well, and or if it is always a pulsing rhythm, there's a function to the negative. It's the trough of the wave in physics. Zenith, nadir, or trough is the low part. I don't remember the high part. Anyway, isn't it true that the negative dip creates the momentum for the increase?
Yes. I wanted to use an example that Matthias de Stefano speaks of. And he literally says it in a sentence form. And in my mind, it became this whole entire profound broadcast.
Here we are.
So let me see if I can do it slowly or succinctly and not go so expansive. But he used the example of, in order to we're going to talk about jumping, the physical act of a human jumping. In order for you to get higher, you've got to come down even lower to have the momentum to go higher. So what we translate as such extreme contrast as we do more of this inner work, how many times have we thought or said, wow, I've done so much of this work and I've had these amazing experiences and really been in this high vibration. How could I possibly be this low right now? Or how could I possibly be, a very common phrase for me for a few years, how could I be back here? I've already done this. Because the lower we go, the higher we go. It's an extreme, it's just it's the law of polarity. So, but what happens is, going back to the rhythm, it's faster now. I don't need to go into the depths of despair for months on end. I can do it very quickly.
Do you mean while you're embodied here in a physical form, you can't trump any of these principles?
Exactly.
They just are.
So to get to that high space, I have to go to the low space. And we're talking high and low, but in physics and in science, in biology, it's actually positive and negative. I mean, electrons, neutrons, protons, the very systems that make up our molecular DNA, I mean, they have positive charges and negative charges, and you can't have one without the other. You cannot have physical creation without that. And so when you apply that to day-to-day life, rather than putting a separation perspective on it of good and bad, right and wrong, can you possibly perhaps reframe that as it's just positive and negative energy both necessary for the state of creation. When you're in the depths of it, you're not looking at it that way. I'm not unrealistic. You're really not. But because you've had that experience and because you have that knowledge and awareness and your conscious awareness now, you can remind yourself.
Yeah.
You really can. And you can say, gosh, I'm really sad right now. I mean, I am really sad. But it's okay to be here. It's okay to cry, or it's okay to feel somber, or whatever the experience is, because I know that the happiness that's going to come from this is even higher than happiness that I've experienced before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I have really developed a very strong relationship with polarity. And it is the one thing that people fight me on the most and resist the most. If, I tried to do this, Terry. I tried to raise my vibration and vibe higher. I'm just using phrases out there that people use. But I keep hearing this, or I keep feeling this, or I keep experiencing this, and it's so dark and it's so heavy. And well, because that's where your focus is, rather than allowing it, you're not moving out of it, because your intention is to keep dissecting that even deeper, dissect it even deeper, dissect it even deeper.
Does it feel like trying, really?
Yeah. So much efforting, trying. Yes.
There's resistance in trying.
Yes. What's a phrase we often say? I'm trying to figure it out.
Yes.
We do this all the time.
It makes me want to cringe my teeth together.
Trying to figure it out. It's like,
I will tell for the audience, I will say that is one of the things that Abraham said to me when I was in the hot seat. They said, do you want to figure everything out? Or do you want to be better at receiving the clear guidance? So I'm just going to say...
Ask that question to us all. How beautiful is that?
Just going to say gently to everyone, if you're really, really trying, go take a nap.
Mm-hmm.
Go for a walk. Put your feet in the dirt. Watch a funny YouTube video. Because it may be counterproductive for you to be trying too hard all the time.
Yes. I got a message very strongly and clearly during an amazing deep tissue massage yesterday, which also was infused with energy healing as well. And the message that was stated, I worked through it and thought, okay, well, what is this message about? And that was really what it is about. Is so making a shift to stop trying is another way. It's letting go of control. We're trying so hard to control the situation that we're creating more things to control.
Yeah, because, putting this in terms of energy, physics, and frequency, as we have been trying to do with each of these principles, there can be resistance on a circuit.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And you don't want to be the cause of a diminishment of your own potential or capacity. Again, I'm using potential and capacity as words that are used in physics. Like if you understand yourself as an energetic impulse from the Creator at the beginning of space and time, you don't want to throw resistance on your trail that you yourself then have to move through. It's enough to feel like we have stuff being thrown at us from our environment, from this cause and effect thing. Make sure you are a cooperative component to your own expansion and ascension process.
I'm feeling called to kind of expand on my example about my message I got yesterday and tying it to control. This just feels important to bring up in case it's an experience that you may have had or may have. It ties back to the collective. The message for me was not just for me. In other words, if I were to release some trying and efforting around a particular experience or situation, it was going to also allow somebody else, it was going to empower somebody else to move out of being enabled. It was going to empower them to step out of a cycle, a pattern. And so was that to the benefit of both of us? Absolutely. I needed to receive a message in a certain way in order to deliver a message to them in a certain way. So it's both of us. I gained something from it. They gained something from it.
So going back to cause and effect for just a moment on that note, is there anything random?
No.
No. Everything is perfectly choreographed for you.
Yes. It was not random that the moment I saw this person, that conversation came up.
Yeah.
By them. It is all, gosh, I just thrive and I'm so filled up in the experience of seeing the connections.
Yeah.
All the time in everything.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
That was a side note. However, it did take my journey of being more and more realized to recognize that. So people will say, I just want to see a sign. I just want to see a connection. I need a message.
There's nothing but
everywhere.
Signs. There are only signs.
Exactly.
The question is, how receptive?
Yeah.
How receptive are we? How open are we? How clean are we? How aware are we of how each of these principles is at work?
Mm-hmm.
There are only signs.
Yes. And it's very exciting for me to be in the presence of someone who sees the signs, receives the signs, and shares with me with such excitement and fervor of, wow, look at how this is all connected. And it's the butterfly effect. It's there's many things you could put to it, but I have actually had the joy of being in that experience with several different people over the last couple of months. It's been really beautiful to witness. Mm-hmm. And they'll say, what is it about when I'm with you, I see so much more? Well, that's law of entrainment, tying back to what I said, because that's where I am. And you're choosing to be in that energy, and I'm choosing to not suppress it. I'm choosing to be that. And anyway, we can tie all this together. But point being is I've had more experiences of that lately because I really have moved even stronger in my evolution of being all of who and what I am without apology, without tempering it, mm-hmm. as you said before. And it does open opportunities for all of us. When each of us do that,
yeah,
it opens up opportunities for all, for the collective.
And I'll remind us, this is the perfect moment. 33 North, 96 West is about this.
Yes.
We are creating an environment at this moment between the two of us and in our energetic field here from this place and emanating this signal. And we're inviting all of you to join us in this frequency, in these frequencies as well. And this actually leads well into this next principle, unless you have more on that. So I think we're to generation. Mm-hmm. Okay, so.
The root chakra.
Let's get to the root of this matter.
Yes.
Part of it. So I think the principle is expressed that energy is only created, generated, and expanded. And there's not a destructive process, or is that a good way to express it? And similarly, my suggestion is that every soul's trajectory generally is from the source to the source. Mm-hmm. So this generative impulse is, there was a word spoken, and all these ideas came into manifestation so that the source can experience itself through us, with us, as us. Mm-hmm. And we have every experience to become, to come to be, or to return back to. We're all on this trajectory. And so that's what we're doing here.
One thing that I noted is E equals MC squared. And energy is neither created nor destroyed.
Just is.
It just is. And it is always reinventing itself. It's transforming and coming in. And so we are creating new realities all the time, or we have the choice and the ability, the privilege to do that. And there's also those teachings out there that, and this is not busting the teaching, if you will. It's supporting it, but yet taking us kind of beyond that, in that we interpret so much of what we go through as a death cycle and a rebirth. And that's been a really powerful conversation people have come to me with lately. Oh, these death of all these identities and all this that I thought I was, and it is so hard. But I know I'm going to create a whole new me and that kind of thing. And really, that's just our interpretation and the experience of it. But if we pan out and look at this generation, and what Jared was saying is that all we are doing is recycling the energy. We get to determine. So when you hear me talk about transmuting energy, I'm basically saying you can be in the energy of what was, or you can transmute, you can shift that energy to all that can be and beyond what you could even fathom or imagine.
And you can't trump this process.
Yeah.
So the oak tree creates the leaf, and then it transforms and the leaf drops, and the leaf transforms, biodegrades, and becomes the fuel, and goes back into the oak tree and becomes another leaf. And there's this constant process of generation, regeneration. You can't trump the process. And so do we want to throw resistance on the trail of that, or do we want to embrace it?
Absolutely. And I choose to embrace it. And I'm hearing one of Jared's principles that he's brought in to this and other episodes is I want to embrace it, but I want to amplify it too. In other words, I want to share it through my essence and energy out there as an invitation and empowerment. Well,
and that's precisely why we are using our voice in this way. Terry and I have had a lot of discussion about this, probably on air and off. For me on a personal level, because anyone who knows me well knows that I am very content being alone, contemplating things, reading, walking in nature, playing with my dog. I can go days and days and days without speaking at all. So when I have guides come to me in dreams and ask me why I'm protecting my voice, there's a certain level of I don't have to speak. I don't have to honor this. I'll just be quiet and stay home in my room. Doesn't my energy affect things positively even if I don't speak? That feels better to me. But no, I've gotten the message. I need to use my voice. Or I love using my voice. I don't want to make it sound like I'm not enjoying this process, but I hope you understand there's a dynamic there.
Yes. And I have complete resonance with that because
you'd be happy just overlanding and being in nature. Yes.
And being in the middle of the forest. And alluding to a conversation we had earlier about some messages that I have shared through various platforms over the last couple of years, is that I became so skilled at the art of being. I was so content being out in the forest in the middle of nowhere, being me in my element, in my essence. And then that niggling, that question, that thing comes in. And here's the thing. When I looked at it, I realized, and I definitely don't want to take a word used outside of the broadcast by Jared, but it feels like it's okay to tie it in.
Of course, we're in this together.
I was very satisfied. I was not in any way, shape, or form unhappy or unsatisfied. I was so fulfilled. That's the word I've been using. I was so fulfilled. But then there's this thing that comes in and says, you sure are stagnant. You sure are stagnant. Are you growing and expanding the potential of what you came here and committed to do?
Can we call that the divine impulse?
Right.
The divine impulse.
So I can be fulfilled in life in every moment. Not saying I am, but I can be. But am I in generation? Oh, chills. Am I in generation? That requires it to be transformed, which also in our experience here requires it to be shared.
Yeah. I'm
for the ripple.
Going back to Esther and Abraham on this as well. Can you ever get it done? Will you ever get it done? Can you ever get it wrong?
No.
And actually, we can go back to Matthias as well on this. I've learned a tremendous amount from his series, Initiation on Gaia. Mm-hmm. If you guys aren't aware of it, if you're enjoying this episode, you most certainly would enjoy experiencing that series. But he expresses the idea of the 4 pillars of creation. Mm-hmm. Expression, experimentation, integration, and transcendence. And then it begins again. Expression, experimentation, integration, and transcendence. That's generation.
Absolutely. There was a wise Lao Tzu teacher that I watched at least 15 years ago or more on a broadcast that said, you come to a point where you transcend the transcendence. And that therein lies going back through the 4 pillars.
Yeah.
And that, in other words, another way to say what we've already said is it's not completion. It's not something you're working to achieve and arrive at. So what to tie all these together, what is often interpreted is that, okay, if you do all these 7 universal laws and you come into coherence and alignment with them, that you are now enlightened. And enlightenment, are you enlightened at that point? Yes. Are you not enlightened if you're not at that point? No. Enlightenment really is coming into the light of or the knowing of. But it's not, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not a tier that you're going to achieve and now you are done with the cycle. If you are still here in human form, you are still experiencing these principles in form and developing them and evolving them. And
so a claim of something like, I'm enlightened, might be spiritual ego and spiritual bypassing. Because you can say, well, I'm in a state of enlightenment, so I can disregard everything around me. I'm just in a happy, floaty place. I'm not criticizing that. I've been in the happy, floaty place.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But if we're talking about enlightenment as in transfiguration and the release of a physical body because you're vibrating so high you can't stay here, that's a whole other thing, which we may address in a future episode. But, so basically, the idea is that by checking in with each of these energy centers and being aware of these principles, we can bring ourselves into coherence. And here's where I want to leave us for my part. what are we coming into coherence or alignment to or with? And I think what I want to say is there is a source version of you. There's a soul essence. There's a higher self. Everyone is in relationship with that aspect of who and what they are. And for my part, my spiritual ideal at this point in my experience is to use these principles and an awareness of my physical vessel to discern my coherence and alignment with that in each moment.
Absolutely. That's beautiful.
If I'm in alignment with other like worldly stuff, I mean, you can just ask, what am I in alignment with right now? The 6 o'clock news, the butterfly, my dog, the children playing down the hall. I may not be able to edit out all of this laughter and play sounds, but of course, at one level, it's blessing all of you to hear my niece and nephew down the hall playing. So,
childlike wonder.
Yeah.
It's been a beautiful experience to be in that space.
They're giving their energy to us.
Yeah. I think if I were to ask what a closing statement for me might be, or an energy, let's tie it to what we just spoke of. Play. Wonder.
Yeah.
Awe.
Yeah.
This doesn't have to be a daunting task to explore these principles. In the depths of it, or in the lower aspects of it, it can feel that way. It can be interpreted as that way. And I'm not telling you that it's not. It's what you claim. But remember, it's the privilege of being an idea in form. To come to understand itself. And I want to say itself being God, being source, creator. That's a privilege.
Yeah.
And when I think of that and remember of that, I actually used a phrase earlier, which sounds very basic, but in conversation with someone who has had a near-death experience, and I have as well, the statement was, after that, everything was all gravy. And it sounds silly, but it was just like, point being is, you don't have to, you don't have to create that. You don't have to create that experience. And I don't say that as a sabotaging of self. It's just part of my journey and experience. But to have the experience, which I had many times even before this particular near-death experience crisis, to be in that experience of awe and wonder and the play with these energies, to me, is very exciting and rewarding. That's it right there. It's very rewarding when we embrace it. Yeah.
I love the words you've used, play and joy and awe and wonder. And I'm going to add innocence, because in some ways, like we've said in a previous episode, the more I experience and the more I think I've learned and figured out, the more I realize that I don't know anything. And you've also reminded me of this concept of the eyes of the Christ. Can you see all things through the eyes of the Christ? Because he was just seeing God everywhere.
Yeah.
In innocence.
When I said in a couple of episodes ago, I am that.
Yeah.
That's yeah. Seeing God, seeing love in everything. And when I don't, allowing the universal principles to reflect that back to me, to mirror that back to me.
So you see, the principle is here to support you and to serve you on your journey, your growth and your development and your learning and your remembering and your return to it.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. I like this space we've landed in. Shall we leave it right there?
Yes, it's yummy.
Okay. As always, thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you very much.
See you next time.